Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Del A.D. Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
I'm so thrilled to have Jo Bailey with us today. Jo Bailey is an author, seminar leader, consultant to organizations and public speaker, psychotherapist, and a licensed psychologist. For the past 46 years, Jo Bailey's life purpose has been to help people find true happiness and peace of mind. As a young psychotherapist back in 1980, Jo searched to understand the connection between the psychology, the physical, and the spiritual led him to Sydney Banks. After that initial meeting, Sydney continued to mentor and inspire Jo for the next 29 years on this paradigm shift in the field of psychology. Throughout his career, Jo has been a pioneer in his profession, weaving together ideas and insights on psychology and spirituality. Welcome, Jo. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Having a good day.
Wonderful.
How about you?
A great day, thank you. So, I always love to start out because I know your biography. I know how you found Sid, but can you tell our listeners? I know you were a young psychotherapist, already working in the field of addiction and psychotherapy before you met Sid. So just tell us how you came across Sid and how that impacted your life.
Well, it's an interesting. All of our journeys are a little bit different in how we met Sid. But my best friend from graduate school is Dr. Keith Blevins, and he had known about Sid for a few years before I met him, and had been working with George Pransky and Dr. Roger Mills and other people trying to get this new psychology out into the world. And Keith would periodically bug me and say, "Hey, you should listen to these Sid Banks tapes." And I was pretty cynical, skeptical, clinical psychologist, thinking, "Oh, here we go, another trip from California." No offense, Del.
I'm from the UK originally. That's fine.
Oh, you are? Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So I was, just kind of dismissive. I'd been interested in a lot of Eastern thought and done yoga and meditated and lots of different things in addition to humanistic psychology. But I tried to be very professional. So about 8 years into my profession, even though I had a really successful clinical practice in Minneapolis and, was kind of doing a lot of training of other therapists and traveling around the country, inside I felt really about burned out. And I was only 33.
Wow.
And I was already burned out. And I was just thinking, there has to be something better than this. What I'm doing is it's not working for me. My clients keep coming back over and over again. I'm seeing them for years. So there's got to be an easier way. And I don't know what, it was just kind of everything kind of came together at one point. And Keith asked me again. And at this point, Sid was going to be speaking at the University of Miami Medical School. And he said, "Why don't you come join us?" And here's Sid. And something just kind of pulled out, it felt like a magnetic pull. I almost beyond my intellect, I said, "Oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea." And it was, even though my skeptical brain was going, "What are we doing? What am I doing? What am I getting myself into here?" There was something very strong, and I couldn't explain, pulling me. And so I went to Florida and met Sid that first night, just in a very intimate gathering, and just maybe 10 people or so. And everyone was just chit-chatting. And as I was a little social butterfly talking away. And all of a sudden everybody got really quiet because Sid was ready to talk. And I kept talking to the person next to me. And everyone was kind of looking at me. And I thought, "Oh God, what have I gotten myself into?" It felt kind of weird. And Sid started talking. And when he did, it just touched something in my heart really deeply. And all I can say is I felt kind of a dual reaction. Part of me felt like I did when I was a little kid, just felt this lighthearted joy and curiosity and wonder. And another part of me, my brain was just, oh, this is too simple. This is too easy to be true. I was very skeptical. And so part of me wanted to run out of the room, and the other part of me was glued to every word he was saying. And so that went on for the evening. But at the same time, it was kind of an odd thing. I met my wife that same day within hours of meeting Sid, and fell in love at first sight with her. So I came home back to Minnesota after that weekend with Sid, very confused that did I fall in love, or what was that? And it really, I didn't know what to make of it. It turned my professional and my personal world upside down. But I had changed, and my work, I couldn't work in the same way anymore. And even though I didn't really know how to teach the principles, or I don't even know if we talked about principles at that point. Whatever I was sharing with my clients, they would look at me and they'd say, wow, that was really powerful. So simple. Why didn't you tell us that before? Most of whom I'd been working with for a long time. And it really impacted my clients. And so the skeptical psychologist in me began to see the results. And I started thinking, I'm onto something here. I don't know what it is, but I've got to learn more. And so I spent the next year going back and forth to Miami, studying with some of the pioneers in this psychology, and did an internship. And I never really looked back. It was like there was just really no way to integrate this into what I had been doing, but to see this as a whole new paradigm shift. And it was super powerful. Personally, all my relationships changed. My stress and burnout seemed to evaporate almost within a few weeks of hearing Sid. I felt like I had a vocational renewal, and my desire to help people was finally realized. I finally had a way to actually help people, not just analyze their problems.
Yeah. I'm so glad I asked you that question. What a beautiful story, and what an amazing testament. And, having been in therapy myself for 30 years, and definitely helping me function at a higher level, it was when I came across the principles that I say that sort of the lid blew off. I mean, it just was like the unlimited potential just sort of shot through me, that I really, I don't have to live in the confines of my old story and my old thinking. It was remarkable. So I love to hear that. Mm-hmm. So you specialized in the area of addiction in particular. What got you into that area?
Well, it was probably unconsciously in a way. I have many people who suffered from alcoholism in my extended family. So I grew up with a lot of cousins whose mother or father or both were alcoholics. It was part of the Minnesota culture. Was heavy drinking was part of what we did in Minnesota to survive the winters, I guess. And so I wasn't, but I remember one of my professors said this in graduate school. He said, someday, Joe, you're going to make a contribution to the addiction field. Wow. And it's going to change the field. And that came from out of the blue. And they didn't teach us anything about addiction and psychology. I don't even know why he said, but I realized later he was an alcoholic. And this was kind of prophetic in a way. So when I went to do my internship at a local mental health center, they had just gotten a big grant from the National Institute of Mental Health and Community Mental Health. And they were starting all of these programs for mental illness and addiction and different things. And we were all very unexperienced and all new to being counselors. And so the director said, Joe, I want you to be in charge of the alcoholism and drug addiction program. And I said, well, I don't know anything about that. And he said, no one else does either. So you're in charge.
That's so funny.
And so I just, jumped in the deep end of the pool and mostly worked with there was one guy who was the happiest and most mentally healthy person on our staff. And he happened to be a recovering alcoholic who was an old Marine sergeant, Vietnam vet. But he had His name was Bud, and he had the biggest smile you've ever seen. He'd walk in the room and just light everybody up. And all the rest of the therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers were very serious and, wouldn't laugh. It was serious business. And Bud was just full of joy. And so he taught me about mental health. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what he had, but whatever he had, I wanted that. Mm-hmm. And it started me on a quest, knowing that there was serenity could be found, and it wasn't going to be through intellectually understanding a lot of theories about psychoanalysis and mm-hmm. all these different things in psychology. And so that just was the seed. And then through serendipitous events, I was asked to be the director of prevention for the state of Texas, the Texas Commission on Alcoholism. I began to train addiction counselors, and I was only like 25, but I hooked up with a person who was a very experienced trainer, and she saw the potential in me. And so I started training therapists who worked in addiction in my mid-20s, and eventually moved back. When my son was born, we moved back to Minnesota, and I started working at the Johnson Institute. And Minnesota was kind of the Vatican of addiction treatment. It was where first inpatient treatment center, Hazelden, mm-hmm. started back in the 40s, and was a pioneer in training people. So I worked at the Johnson Institute, where we trained people in intervention, and I was head of the family department, the family school. So we taught people about family therapy and working with addicts. And so anyway, so I just kind of went from one thing to another. That's amazing. The field found me rather than me finding it.
And tell me, what is it about when you mentioned, I think I was reading your website, and it said that the principles provided a fertile ground for transformation for people within the world of addictions. So can you talk to that? What was it about the principles in particular that helped more than any of the other models of treatment up to that point?
Well, let me just go back a little bit. Like when Alcoholics Anonymous was formed back in the early 30s by Bill Wilson, mm-hmm. Bill W., he's known by. What led to that was that he had a transformational experience. He called it a spiritual awakening. And he was at the door of suicide. He was ready to commit suicide. And he just, in desperation, he asked for divine intervention or help. And he had this very powerful experience, much like Sydney Banks's description mm-hmm. of his experience, where his ego disintegrated, and he knew he would not have the desire to drink after that experience of the divine within him. Mm-hmm. And I had been in a lot of AA meetings and a lot of Al-Anon meetings, and I'd seen occasionally people who had that kind of a transformational spiritual awakening, but they were fairly rare. But they would be the person in the group that was the anchor that held the ground. And occasionally that would happen in treatment, that people would have that aha awakening experience. And those people didn't seem to struggle with recovery. They seemed to have seen something in themselves awaken that removed the desire to have to fill that void. The void was filled. They found the serenity, the inner peace, the connection that they'd been looking for. But everything we were doing in treatment centers and hospitals and clinics, was more about analyzing the past. A lot of the psychology was analyzing your past and having to work through all your issues and identifying your patterns of thought and working through your emotional catharsis and this and that. And it was a very painful, long-term, arduous task to maybe someday get a little bit of peace of mind. Mm-hmm. But it was always going to be hard work. And when I heard Sid Banks, the light bulb that went off in me was, this is the missing link that will allow addicts to cultivate the ground where that transformational experience can spring forth, can come up. It provided a constant. I mean, we're all looking for something that we can rely on, an absolute that we can rely on, like we do with the principle of gravity. But we're all looking for something that will give us that peace that we seek. And addicts, Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, once said to Bill W. in a letter that alcoholism was, on a spiritual level, the thirst for a divine connection. And even though most addicts didn't know when they're looking in the other end of the bottle, they were looking for a divine connection. People were looking for wholeness. They were looking for something to alleviate their suffering that was reliable. And the best they'd known to do at that point was to drink or to look outside in drugs or some sort of other addiction to momentarily escape their suffering and pain and desperation. That was the best they knew. But in what Sid was bringing to the world through his discovery of these constants, this set of principles that explain the inside-out nature of experience and where our feelings actually come from. It was in that discovery that gave people a compass and a map to find their way to transformation. And transformation is not a singular event. It's an ongoing evolutionary process that I know in my own experience of having met Sid 40 years ago now. It wasn't like I got this and I'm good to go. It was like I have moments where I have moments of clarity, and I see this very clearly, where it's my thinking that's creating my stress, or it's my thinking that's creating my jealousy or my angst or whatever, and it helps clear my mind. But I still get caught up. As a human being, we get caught up in old habitual thinkings because life will give us a challenge that our old level of understanding isn't quite up to withstand that. And so we slip back into the old feelings and experience. And that's not failure. That's part of the transformational process that is built into us. It's designed into us to help us go deeper in our understanding, to have a deeper realization or insight about our true nature, our true divine essence that we are, that we came into this world with, that was covered up with a lot of innocent, unnecessary, habitual thinking that made us feel separate from that. So transformation is like reconnecting to that which we already are. And it's so profound, and it's so simple when we see it, and it's very elusive when we don't.
Yeah. Gosh, I love the way you describe this. It really, I could just listen to you all day. It's really beautiful. But I want to ask you, it's pretty obvious to me, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Where was the inspiration? Because I know there's the conference coming up, which I will be attending, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, great.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
so, so what was the inspiration behind this? It's the first conference exclusively for recovery, isn't it? Is that in the three principles? So tell us a little bit about that and who it's for, because I know it's not just for practitioners.
Yeah.
So,
well, first of all, who it's for is really, originally I thought this would just be for three principles professionals who who are already with an addiction to just come and share what they're learning and discovering. But then as I thought about it more, now this is really for the layperson, for people who might love an addict, who are in a relationship with one, or maybe someone who's in recovery, but they haven't really found that inner peace that they're looking for. They're still struggling with their addiction, or they're maybe sober but not serene. But I also thought it's also for people who are in the field of recovery, working from a more traditional disease paradigm model, who have heard about the three principles, or who have encountered people who have gone through three principles-based treatment and have seen something different happening there. There's something really powerful happening. So they're curious. So it's for professionals in the addiction field. There's continuing education credits for nurses, addiction counselors, psychologists, social workers, etc. So that's who it's for. It's really pretty open. But where the idea came from, from the time I met Sid, I just knew, as I said earlier, this was the missing link in what's been missing in treatment and in recovery circles. That when we don't understand how our mind actually is working in the moment from an insight level, not just intellectually understand it, but really understand and see in the moment when I'm having a thought experience of, let's say, stress, that what I'm thinking about is not what's creating my stress. It's the way I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about that's creating my stress. And that awareness is like a light bulb going off that wakes us up and sees the very act of our creation. We're creating experience every moment. We're creating experience with the power of mind, thought, and consciousness. And every now and then we wake up and realize that we're doing that. Mm-hmm. And in those moments, we self-correct. It's like, oh, don't go there, Joe. That's a big mistake. Or, oh, there I go again. Oh, whoops. We just kind of, and in the beginning it was, oh, no, not again. And later I have more compassion. I could see, oh, there I go again. Oh, hey, I'm human. So what? Mm-hmm. No big deal. It's just, and just waking up to that fact removes all the thinking that's creating all the insecurity and angst that's fertile ground for relapse, for transfer of addiction, for other forms of mental illness. So when people don't understand who and what they are and how this mind works to create and remove what's in the way of experiencing that, when people see that, it's like strengthening your psychological immune system. You can deal with adversity so much better. You can get over emotional upset much more quickly. It's not as intense. And it's always the stress and the emotional tension that triggers relapse. So if that's all the three principles did for the addiction community, it would be monumental, because the relapse rate is like 70%. It's really high in most treatments. It's unbelievable. If you get 25% recovery rate, that's astronomical. Mm. And I'm not saying that three principles treatment, every person that hears the principles, that's it, they're done, they never relapse. That's not true. But there's a much higher rate of non-relapse, and relapse is much shorter. It becomes actually a learning experience that helps them evolve to an even higher level of wellness or inner peace.
Yeah, I love, I'm not knocking the sort of 12-step, but the gentleness in how in the three principles community, that I love what you just said there, that a relapse is part of the recovery. It's part of that journey, as opposed to, you relapse, start at the beginning, that sort of start at, I think that sort of pressure can lead to even more anxiety, which can even lead to more wanting to reach for something on the outside to quell that anxiety. Mm-hmm. But I think as you just described it, it's such a beautiful, gentle way of looking at it. So let's talk. It
takes a lot of the shame and the guilt out of, and when relapse doesn't necessarily mean using again. Mm-hmm. I relapse into old thinking every day.
Exactly.
Because I have a brain that gets triggered, and there I am again. Yeah. But recognizing it in the moment protects me from my own devices, in a sense. Mm-hmm. Protects me from my own insecure thinking. So I have an immunity to that. And yet I still do stumble and fall. And when I do, it helps me, it motivates me to go even deeper and find more humility to listen deeper. And so it just, we're all going through a journey into the unknown wilderness of life. The future is an unknown. But if you have a map and a compass, even if you get lost, you can find your way back. And for me, the principles are that compass and that map that give us a way back home to who we are. So I see the other thing I see in the treatment centers that I work with that have taken the 3 principles on as their foundation or their philosophy of treatment is the staff is so happy. They're in such a good mood generally. They're so much more compassionate. One of the jobs I've been a professor at a university training addiction counselors, and part of my job was to go around to all the internships and visit all these different treatment centers, mostly 12-step addiction-based CBT, other kinds. And there's some, they're all vary in their quality, et cetera, but the overall mood of the staff tends to be very stressed, kind of grim. There's a lot of burnout. We have an extremely high burnout rate in the addiction field. You walk into a 3 principles treatment center and people, they just say, I could do this for the rest of my life. This is no big deal. I love doing what I do. Mm-hmm. It's not stressful anymore. It's like getting to watch miracles every day and seeing people change. It's just feeds my soul to do this work. And that's the way I feel. I mean, I'm 70, almost 72. Wow. I can't imagine not doing this. Mm-hmm. This is it's my joy to help people and to have a way to actually help people.
Yeah. That's incredible. I was just with Judy Sedgman and Christine Heath at the weekend too, and they were like, we're never retiring. This gives us so much. Why would we ever retire? So we're actually sort of coming to the end of our time together. So I just want to make sure that the people that are not watching and can't see your website. So if you can just give your website and also give the how they can find more information about this, the recovery conference that's coming up, and maybe a couple of the keynote speakers that you're going to be having there.
So yeah, we're going to have speakers from all over the world, from the UK and Spain and all over the US who are working in treatment centers. So it's going to be a wonderful faculty. If you go to my website, www.joebailey and Associates, spelled out, and Associates, on that website in the front page, there's a link to the conference, which is www.3P Recovery Conference. But you can put that on the podcast when you send that out. Mm-hmm. And so you can learn more about the schedule, the costs, how to sign up, hotels. We have scholarships available. We're also going to be live streaming this. So if you can't attend in person, you can still attend. And we have, Sandy Crott is going to be presenting. We have people from a variety of treatment centers around the country and in the UK. Jacqueline Hollows from the UK, who's worked in prison programs, is going to be speaking. Dr. Amy Johnson, she and I are co-hosting the conference. Dr. Bill Pettit will be there. Harry Dubitsky. Can't remember everybody right now, but lots of really wonderful teachers.
Exactly. Well, as I said, I'm so excited to be going as well. And I look forward to seeing you in person there and all the other wonderful people in our community. So thank you again for sharing today. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Del. I really appreciate it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I will see you in May. Take care.
I hope to see a lot of you out there in May.
Wonderful. Thank
Minnesota's beautiful in May, by the way. Not always cold.
Sounds wonderful. Okay, well, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed my conversation with Joe Bailey, I highly recommend that you read his latest book, Thriving in the Eye of the Hurricane: Unlocking Resilience in Turbulent Times.